Before I kick off in earnest, obviously this is about Alexa and conversational apps and Go, but there is a quick warning I want to give to people who, well, everyone nowadays who has something that listens to them. Particularly true for people listening at home later on YouTube that have an Alexa device nearby. I'm going to say, here, let's go over it. Let's go over it real quick. That's your Echo. There's the mute button. Probably going to want to use that or just not listen to this talk because I'm going to say Alexa a lot. So, fair warning. Okay. So, yeah, good afternoon. My name is Mike Flynn. This is an incomplete list of things about me. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Studio 71, which is a media network and talent agency based in Los Angeles. I used to be here from St. Louis, though, and I was architect for Answers. And if those of you are from St. Louis, you might remember a little blog I used to do here. And I'm talking to you now. So that's what I do for work. This has nothing to do with this at all. What this talk about is more my hobby of the last year, I guess, year and a half, which is talking to computers and getting Alexa to do the different things I want it to do. I love talking to computers. I don't know why. It might be because of years of science fiction that used computers as plot devices. But for some reason, it's in my brain, and I love them. And so when the Echo came out, I got one right away and used it way more than I thought. And then they released the SDK, and it was game over. I was making all kinds of little things and playing around with the platform. One of the early things I built was the very first unofficial Jeopardy app on the Alexa, and I stress unofficial because I don't want to get sued, and those eyebrows are serious. They've since made an official one. Mine's better. But I've also made a bunch of helper libraries, which we're going to cover in a little bit. And I recently made an app called Tunnel, or Echo Tunnel, that allows you talk to your Alexa device, and you can connect to one of your computers, then you can send a command. So you could say, connect to my iMac, and then lock, and your computer will lock remotely, things like that. So why have I spent a healthy chunk of my 2016 on silly Alexa apps and things? Well, what is the big deal with these apps? So beyond just making it say jokes and being weird with it and making slides about Alex Trebek, which I'm going to leave up as long as possible, is the idea. Look, you talk in plain language, right? You're not sending commands and it's CLI interface. You have to speak a certain way. The idea is you just talk, and we've come a long way. Years ago, we had IRC commands that you would kind of you'd throw into conversation. You'd command bots with them. You'd kick people out of the room, but they're hardly conversational. They're effectively command line, right? And those are still around today, and that's great. Slack uses basically the exact same paradigm. But this year, we've seen an explosion of truly conversational apps where you're just talking regular language. And Siri, Google Assistant, as it's now called. Same with typing, Facebook Messenger, and obviously Amazon Echo and Alexa. Each of these platforms allow you to talk in regular language and do commands without having to do a particular way to talking. And they all have varying degrees of custom application support, but we're going to kind of focus this on Alexa because it's the one that's been out the longest. So why? Why was 2016 the year where these apps exploded? Well, I've got a few theories for that. First is cost, right? I mean, like everything in computing, things are getting cheaper all the time. And platforms like Wit AI, which Facebook bought a year or so ago, Google Cloud, Amazon Web Services have shown that you can roll your own ways of analyzing natural language cheaply and responsive enough that you can actually have a conversation. Two, competition. It's at some degree, if Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Google decide they're going to work on something, it doesn't really matter if we like it or not, but we do like it, and it's good, right? These big people are competing, and they're fighting over things, and we've seen it accelerate over the last year because of it. And then, novelty. Any new interface is going to be novel, right? You've got people making Siri tell jokes, or you can have Alexa say silly things, repeat back to what you say with Simon Says. That's a lot of it, right? Any new paradigm is going to have that kind of novelty to it. But we're starting to see real usage, actually. People are actually ordering lifts. People are ordering food. They're sending tweets. And it's becoming an actual thing and not going the way of a 3D TV, right? So why are we seeing the actual usage, you could ask? Well, I think I can speak for people here at this conference in that we all want Jarvis, and that's the dream, right? But beyond that, for non-Jarvis-y people, the conversational applications are easy to get started with, right? They're a little more friendly than what we have out there now, and they're fun. People enjoy playing around with them, trying things to see if it'll respond to them. Novelty begets usage, right? Alexa, turn on the living room lights. See, is a lot easier than getting out your phone and finding the app or downloading the app if you already have the Hue app, tapping on living room, and we live in the future. No one hits switches anymore, so the faster way to get the lights on, the better, right? This is a very easy way. Grandmothers can do this kind of thing, right? Speaking of them, there are still a lot of people that are genuinely confused by their desktop and even their tablets. And this is just one more step, if you do the app correctly, that they can make it and get actions done and compute on a platform without having to know dock versus start menu or where iOS keeps the app tray and all that kind of stuff. Not surprisingly, of course, young people have jumped on the conversational bandwagon more quickly than most, and you see app usage in younger apps, can tailor to young people getting a lot of usage. No further example than my 4-year-old daughter, who really used Alexa as her very first computing platform. We had to coach her to speak a little more slowly. Alexa had to learn the speech patterns of at that time 3-year-old, but they came together pretty quickly, and now she does all kinds of things, right? She's telling Alexa to crank it up when a song she's playing she likes is on. She asks to tell a joke all the time. She doesn't get any of the jokes, but she laughs anyway. She's a great audience. And the other day, I walked in to the living room, and she told Alexa, "I love you," which, low bar. She's 4. She loves everybody. But still, though, having that emotional connection with an app you kind of talk to and interface more than just clicking or tapping is, not crazy, right? You feel a connection to these apps if they're built correctly that you wouldn't have normally with a Photoshop. No one's ever told Photoshop it was their best friend or confessed their love for Clippy, right? Maybe Photoshop, definitely not Clippy. No one loves Clippy. I didn't even make that. That was out there already, which I thought was great, right? And the excitement for these apps is also true for developers. We're seeing a spike in skills, as Alexa calls them on their skill store, that are coming in all the time. Here's a random screenshot I took of this, and there's just all kinds of crazy apps coming on all the time. They're really getting very excited about it. There are obviously apps that work just beautifully on these kind of platforms, and I'm sure all of you know about them, right? Things like 20 questions, right? Easy, right? It works great on Alexa, and you can play it as a group. Automatic has an app, so kind of car automation. You can ask, Alexa, how much gas do I have before you leave the house, or how long have I driven the other day? Uber, super simple, right? I need an Uber. You call an Uber with Alexa. It's there while you're still getting kind of ready for the day. There are other apps that just have to exist because it's the internet. So, for example, cat facts. We're all looking for a way to get cat facts more easily, and this is the bleeding edge. We're also always looking for a faster way to make a fart joke, and that exists as well. I get it. It makes perfect sense. Yes, for a fart, it farts. The next one is a little harder to understand, but glad it exists. Glad someone made it. It's a pickup lines one. I don't get it. I don't know if I see a lot of people plugging in echoes in bars, but if for some reason this crazy Echo de Bergerac scheme works for you, then you can continue the ruse with the marriage app. I have no idea what this thing gives you. I couldn't get it to work actually when I turned it on, but great. That's the way to get help. Then by all means. The next one actually that I found of an example is I think my favorite. Richard Stallman fun facts. How many can there be, right? And would even like this? It's on Amazon, but besides the point. The one thing that you'll notice right away on the store as well is there is a quote bot for every famous person who has ever said anything ever. Specifically old white guys who look great in black and white pictures, but seriously, there's a lot of quote apps. And, good job, glad you made them. But I think it really speaks to the fact that developers are excited about these platforms, and they want to make something with it, and then they look at the empty Sublime text window and end up making a quote app, right? Because it's just hard to It's a very different thing to make these apps. So a valid question is, what do you make in these apps? What works well for conversational applications? Music, right, is a great use case. Things that are very single tasks, right? You want to be very specific tasks that things that you want to play this song plays, right? Hands-free cooking, all the things like that, like change, metrics or repeating a recipe back because you're doing something. You don't want to do that thing where you swipe the phone without trying to get the gook on your hands on it. Avoiding that is a great use for these. And then automation, right? Home automation's all over the place. And one thing that works really well that is kind of, I think a lot of people are, it's obvious when you think about it, but it's a little bit of a surprise, is family or group use. Specifically in Echo or eventually Google Home, these things, they're going to sit on a shelf. They're not someone's in their pocket, right, where you have to ask for their code to get in. Families and groups can use these apps really easily, ordering things on Amazon or playing a game together, and that kind of stuff really plays well on this. And yes, if you need to get an Einstein quote to get through your day, those are fantastic uses for this as well. So again, single tasks, keeping it simple. What are the pro tips then, right? If you have an app idea now that works, what are the ways to make it really sing? One is vary your responses. And I think this is the easiest to do and the biggest gain, which is basically just don't say OK every time when the user asks to turn on the lights. Those slight variations, which everyone immediately knows how to do, right? An array, pick a random one. Have an array of affirmative responses. Something as simple as that makes your app feel so much more alive that you're doing different responses you get back. Add a little personality to your application. Two, surprise rather than let them down. We can't make Jarvis. Jarvis doesn't exist. So don't make an app that promises the world and then responds with, I don't know what you're talking about, for 9 times out of 10 when your requests. Be very specific about what the app is supposed to do, but if there's a great little way to add something, ask to share something after they've made it, or just those little things that come up in the application development that, oh, it'd be great if I could do this. That's a great way to make it feel more alive without having to ask for the world and not knowing how to answer any of those questions. Evolve your app. So you're seeing a theme. Simple, simple, simple is the theme here. But a key element that the developers forget about this too is that you have to really drag your users along, right? You have to start with a very specific use case, release. Let them use it. Then do another release to add a feature and kind of go at a very methodical pace. There's no update screen. There's not even a menu that they can see the new stuff on. So you have to kind of really pull them through to let them know of a new feature. And it's really important that you evolve and start slow and evolve. It also, incidentally, helps you because you need to, as we'll see, map out these models, these speech models, and that way you're going to kind of grow slowly with them as well. The good news is on this is that the turnaround time on these apps was pretty quick because you don't have to worry about UI. So you can develop a whole version of this fairly quickly, a lot more quickly than you could do an iPhone app where you're worrying about the great way to have the visual UI. Clearly cue the user. When you need input, tell them you need input. Don't just kind of stop talking. You got to let them know that they need to talk. And if it's a question that they need to think about, like it's a game, a trivia game, don't just give up on them. You got to make sure that you keep the session open and let them respond and cue them again. It's very important that just people don't see this stuff, so they got to be helped along through the process. Minimize options. Same thing. Don't ask them for 4 or 5 things at a time. Ask them for 1 thing at a time, and keep things very specific so that they can get through it without being able to see anything. Lastly, let people be polite. There's a lot of apps where people want to say please and thank you in these apps, right? They do. They want to be polite. Not on the highway, not at the Trump rally, but most other places they do want to be polite, and you need to let them be polite. Don't let a please or a thank you throw off your speech model, right? So that's the kind of the pro tips and the best way to make an app, the best ideas for apps. Let's quickly go through about how to actually make an app. This is going to be very specific to Alexa, obviously. The apps are REST interfaces, but they're obviously very tiered towards Amazon's particular needs. So here's a general flow, right? This is from Amazon. The little man talks to the Echo device, and the service then parses out what skill they're called. The apps are called skills you're talking about, and then pulls out the variables that skill is defined to look for. Sends that over to your app, number 4, which then does whatever, turns on a light in this case. And then what's not shown here is you respond back with either a verbal response or optionally an image or text that you can send to the app for Amazon's case. So we're going to get to code, and code's obviously important. We're at a coding conference. But in these kind of apps, when you're going to map out a speech model, you can't sleep on the configuration stuff. This is really most of the app. And you do it all through in this case, the Amazon dashboard, but Facebook or the other ones have the same kind of thing. And there are two key parts of this. One is the intents, and the other part is the utterances. And these are the ways you're kind of teaching the model to learn how to work with your app. So this is the example of an intent. So the intent is a JSON file. You got to manually edit JSON. It's fun for you. And what you're doing is you're just listing out all the different types of requests your app will get. So this is an example of the Jeopardy, obviously. A start Jeopardy intent has no variables. You're just, can I play a game, kind of thing. Versus the pick category intent has one variable, a category. So you have to go through, you're not worried about verbiage here. You're just worried about the types of tense that you want to call them coming in and the variables that they should pull out for you. So your requests will have the intent name and then the variables that they pulled. Utterances are the example text. And this is where you're really changing the system, training the system, sorry. You can see you have the intent name and then an example phrase. So start Jeopardy, ask Jeopardy to start a game, is what that's saying there. Or play a game. So you got to do all the different variations. The more the merrier in this kind of thing. When you have one that's a variable, you can see they pull out food category. You have to say, give me a food question. So food is an example, and you're saying this food word is an example of the category variable. And as you do more and more and more and more and more, and again, the more the merrier, they will learn to pick out those variables when they send it to your app. So you're going to come back to this 1,000 times when you're making your app, because you're going to think of a new way to say something, or a variable is going to slip through, and you'll be going back and forth and editing this. So this is going to be an integral part of the thing. So assuming we've got that, good. And again, you're going to go back to that a lot. But the actual app itself now, let's run through that. Like I said, REST application, fairly straightforward. JSON passing back and forth, right? It's got a bunch of security requests, which we'll get to in a second. And the 3 request types are launch, intent, and session ended, which are fairly self-explanatory. To go back to the application flow real quickly, now so that we configured number 2, and now we're going to go on to number 4. And like I said, there's a lot of security stuff, which is great, right? Amazon does a very good job of making sure that these requests are coming to them and them alone, and or your requests to you are coming from them, and it's good stuff. Here's a list. It's verifying the requests from them and checking the signature and the timestamp. It's so much stuff. It's a lot, and you don't want to do this every time. So they know this, and what they suggest that you do is use their Lambda service. If you're not familiar, Lambda came out, 2 years ago, I guess. It allows you to upload code, primarily JavaScript, but I think there's a lot of other languages now. And it runs on their service per request, and they've built in a ton of libraries that allow you to not have to worry about this or this, right? And they, doing the checking the responses, it's SSL for you, automatically free, and it's great. It allows you to really play with the system really easily. However, I didn't want to use Lambda. I wanted to use something that ran on my server at home so I could have it interact with some of the stuff in my house, right? The kind of whole reason, the Jarvis stuff, right? I also didn't want to write it in JavaScript, no offense. I wanted to write it in Go, which I was playing with a lot lately. So I built a library originally named called Go Alexa that allows you to not have to worry about all the security stuff. It takes all the boilerplate out and allows you to just focus on making your app, because again, you want these to be simple. You're going to make a bunch, right? So there's Go Alexa. Don't steal the name. It's super original. And this is it. So this right here is a fully functional Go Alexa app, right? 21 lines or whatever. So you're not worrying about any of the stuff they have you go through. And we'll just go through this here. I got better slides here. First is application definition. And if you don't know Go, I think Go is pretty readable, and I'll kind of step through it. And there's not a lot of code in this, but it is Go. This is just a slice or an array of your applications. You can run multiple applications out of the same binary in this case. So you're defining an endpoint, you're defining the app ID that you get from Amazon, and then you're putting handler functions for each of the major intents or on-launch handler events that come through. For those that do know Go, might be wondering why I'm using an interface up there, and that is because you can also pass in Alexa.standard application types if you wanted to run like a regular website out of the same binary to a login page or the website for your app or something like that. Okay, handler. So a handler takes in an echo request type and an echo response type. You look at the information on the request and you modify the response. It's a pretty simple example, admittedly. Let's look at a slightly more better example here. So I think it's fairly readable. This one you can see is doing a switch statement on the type of intent that comes in. And if it's a status intent, in this case, this is something I wrote that pings our company's status page and just tells me if everything's fine or not. So it's parsing through some JSON, says, yep, everything is fine, and then outputs the message, all applications are good, or it outputs something is down. And then if something, an intent comes through we didn't know about, it'll say, I'm sorry. And keep the session open so you can ask again. So still a simple example, admittedly, but you can see that you're not worrying about any Alexa-specific stuff. You're just worried about your app. And you could easily modify this to use a different kind of, if Google Home comes out and do something easily, you could easily do this, the same kind of thing, because you're not worrying about a lot of Alexa-specific stuff. Lastly is the main function, which could not be simpler, and I don't even want to do the slide for it. You just Alexa run, pass it the application slice and a port, and that's it. And then it just runs as a regular Go binary, however you want to run it. So like I said, it handles the incoming JSON body, handles the outgoing JSON response, it handles all the requests. You just need to worry about SSL and running the app somewhere. So another thing you're going to do a lot of, in addition to the app is going to be fairly simple more than likely. You're going to be playing with the speech model a lot, and you're also going to be testing it a lot. So how do you test these apps is a very good question. If you have an Alexa device already, like an Echo or Fire Stick or I think it's the main ones right now, as long as you're logged in with your same developer account on that device, you can leave your apps in development mode, and they will automatically be available on that device. And to be quite frank, everything I've written is still in developer mode because there's not a lot of, most of it is kind of personal stuff that I've written for home automation, and even bigger stuff, there's no way to monetize it or even cover the cost of the hosting. So I've been leaving everything in development mode, and no one seemed to care. If you do not have an Alexa device, or you want to test on a different one for whatever reason, Alexa or Amazon has put out a web version of Echo at echosim.io. And there is also some really great apps that come out that also plug into the Alexa voice interface that can use every skill just like anything else can. The one that I use is an Android app called Alexa. It's a Play Store link for it, but it's, you hit a button and you talk and it's Alexa. It works really well. So, covered a lot of ground, but a couple of takeaway points for all of this stuff. One, keep things simple. I cannot stress that one enough. You want to have things as simple as possible so that your app and your speech model is as clean and simple as possible, because you're going to be going back and forth. Even something as simple task, you're going to be going back and tweaking a different way to say something, or I guarantee you the first person you show it to will say it in a way you never freaking thought they would say, and the thing will say, I don't know what you're talking about, and you'll go, I apologize, let me work on that. I guarantee you it's going to happen. So keeping things simple will allow you to not have to get in the weeds with 7,000 things you need to recognize, and just really focus on turning the lights on, or ordering something, or booking a flight, whatever it may be. And again, it also keeps things simple for the user, so that they're not having to stab around with random requests and things. They're just able to say what they need and get out. Keep that interface simple. 2, use a library. I'm not one of those guys that always like to use libraries for everything, but in this case, I would highly recommend it, because if you keep things simple, you will need to make a lot of little apps, and you do not want to implement the checking of timestamps and the verifying of the certificate and the signature and all that kind of stuff every time. So, if you want to write it in Go, I think my library is pretty good. If you want to write it in something else, there's a library for I think most every language has a library now. And if you don't want to worry about anything, then I suggest you use Lambda. But use something, because it's so new, you're going to want to, like I said, play with that speech model, play with the way your kind of app interacts with the user and has the conversation back and forth. You're not going to want to worry about all the different security stuff, which is good, but you're just not going to want to implement it every time. And lastly, and I think this is really the most important one, don't make a quote app. We're good. We're really good on quote apps. If you have to make a quote app, make it about someone who's not old and white, I guess. But outside of that, we're good. We're good. So that's pretty much it. I've got my code up on GitHub. In that Go Alexa library, there is the full Jeopardy app is there. Don't release it. You remember the Alex Trebek eyebrows. But it's all in there, including the intents and the utterances. So you can fully configure the app and see how it all works, even with the configuration stuff. There's also a few Hello World stuff in there. And I'd love to see what you make. If you make an app, whether it's Echo or Facebook Messenger or whatever it may be, as long as it's not quote-based, I would love to see it. So send it over to my Twitter's on there, my website, and it'd be great to get some explosion of really great developers making on these apps, because it's super fun, and it just needs to have a little more not quote stuff, So thank you. I mean, that's it. So we've got time for questions if anyone has questions. Start up front. So you're dependent on the platforms, and right now, no. Not with the Alexa stuff, which is why everything's in dev mode for me. On the text side, Messenger, Facebook Messenger has some ways you can buy things through apps. You can't buy the bot itself, but you can buy things in the bot. And the one caveat for Facebook Messenger is there isn't a built-in speech model with it. You'd have to implement your own, like on a Wit AI or something like that. They just have the general bot back and forth interface. So if you want to do the conversational stuff, you need to go and find your own. But you can sell things in Facebook Messenger, but not the other ones. Not yet.
What's an example of an app on Alexa that you feel like can only be done with the conversational interface that really sold it to you?
Only done is interesting. Most of the stuff that I really got excited about first is stuff that's just faster. Things that you could, things you didn't want to have to do and pull out a phone and do the whole thing. Ordering an Uber while you're getting ready in the morning, checking the traffic, that kind of stuff is really good. I think there are some things that we're kind of developing and kicking around that are almost so much better. They really make sense on these, and that's kind of the group games make a lot of sense. That's that kind of family style applications are things that you don't really see on phones and tablets because they're all kind of hardwired to at least somebody. So that stuff is something I'd really like to see more of, and I think it really works well on the platform.
I'd like to throw out that my favorite thing to do with it is timers.
Yeah.
When I'm in the kitchen and my hands are goopy, I don't want to be touching my iPad.
Right. Timers are a lot. Yeah. Everyone uses timers first, for sure. Mm-hmm. So right now with Alexa, as it stands, and from what I understand, they're adding new versions of this. But the way you trigger a skill, they call it, is you have to say, Alexa, tell Jeopardy, or Alexa, ask Jeopardy. There's variations in there, but right now it's kind of something of some kind of verb and then an intent name. They don't have that pattern is kind of the way it is right now. I think Google Home might be experimenting with new ways to do it, but they haven't talked about it yet. And I know that Alexa is also trying to expand that, but right now it's a little more rigid in the way you call the apps.
I would just say a word to the wise, avoid using numbers in your Alexa skills because it interprets numbers as strings.
Yes. It's a good point. Yeah, you got to really play around with, they've added a lot more, I didn't cover it in this, but they've added a lot more of the variable types and intents. So you can say, early on, they just kind of had string or an array of things you can tell them it's an option. They've added a lot more, and they're getting better with numbers, but it's still it's still kind of a longer testing cycle when you use numbers. You got to make sure you're checking on your side to make sure it could be a string or it might not be a string, that kind of stuff.
Do you know if Alexa can understand non-English words?
Yes, I think it have launched. I think it has launched in somewhere else, maybe. I don't know if it's officially launched in. It's completely dependent on the Alexa service. So it could turn on tomorrow. They could announce that it's in Russian and everything would be fine. But I don't know exactly what other countries it's in. I thought it was in a few, but I couldn't tell you exactly what other countries they've launched in.
Can third-party Alexa apps do like deferred notifications, like they remind you to do stuff?
So as it stands right now, this is a great question. This is my most requested feature. Right now, no. However, I just got a survey the other day from Amazon Alexa asking me how I would like to have that work. So they are clearly well aware of this, and I think the Google Home, if you watch the demo video of that, they show a notification pinging the person, and I'm sure that put pressure on them. Same as why there's a $50 Echo Dot that screwed me over from when I paid $100 for one. But yeah, I think they're coming to terms on that pretty quickly. Way back there.
What information do you get as a developer when a user issues an incorrect statement to your scale?
So if you don't have an intent for, like if say you didn't put an intent for some action and there's no utterances for it, and they say ask Jeopardy to make me a pie, I believe it depends on how bad they mangle up, right? If they completely screw it up, it'll say I don't even know what you're talking about, and you won't get a request at all. I think otherwise it might default to a session start command maybe just to say hey, this person talked to you, but I don't know what the heck they said. And it'll respond back and say, I don't know what, this skill doesn't respond to this intent, or so it'll say some kind of error message to them.
But as a developer, updating your utterances is just kind of like asking your users?
Yes, it is right now. There's not a great logging of seeing how people missed it right now that I'm aware of.
But you can look at the accompanying act to see actually what the user said.
If it's in dev mode, yes. Yes, if it's in dev mode. So yeah, you're right. That's a good point. If you're in dev mode, you can actually see, and you can see it to yourself too, as you're talking. If you miss it, you can see how it interpreted your skill, your text. Once it's in prod, I don't think they don't get anything back to you, I don't think. But in the middle there. Yeah.
Because Alexa has to be listening all the time, so I'm wondering if you know much about how Amazon handles that would give a lot of people, including myself, some knowledge of security.
Yeah. As far as I know, and they are kind of, make sure we're good on time. They do the same kind of thing that Google does, which is they will store it, but they say it's anonymized data, and they will store it to make their system better. That kind of keep it around for a certain amount of time. But I don't know if they've ever released and said it's a hard this many weeks or this many months, and then we clear it out. I don't think they've ever said that publicly, but I do know they keep it around to rerun them on. I imagine they check the requests after they hear you say a curse word or two, right? And that kind of stuff.
So you said it's important to lead people to show them your new features that you come out with. How do you, when it's all audio, how do you let someone know that
Right.
you have a new feature?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, and that's kind of plays into keeping things targeted. A new feature that's a completely, it's always a design. Is the new feature should be a second skill, or it should be in the app. If it's something that's kind of a next step of the step you already took, right? If it's like I said, if you're booking a flight with it, and then when they book the flight successfully, you say, hey, would you like me to email this to 4 or 5 people? Right off some email address. That kind of stuff works really well, and you just gotta let them know, and you just gotta verbalize the new feature of, can I help you with this? Other ways you can do it is, if you get back a wonky, you could put in your code, if you get back kind of a wonky response, you could kick into something to say, maybe you could try this, or there's a new feature there. It's an art. You got to kind of work it in there, and that's why you got to go slow, is because depending on the feature, there's probably 4 or 5 different ways you could try to kind of work it in. And maybe the answer is, this should just be a separate skill. That's always got to be in the back of your mind, too.
What kind of information do you get about the user when they message you? Like, you get your email address.
So you get, in the initial request, you will get a Amazon user ID and an Amazon session ID. The session is for that session, obviously, and once they stop using the app, the session dies shortly after that, I think, unless they kick it right back on. They give you a little bit of window in case they accidentally closed it early and they get back in. That session, I think, stays alive a little bit longer. You get an Amazon user ID that is unique to that user and is, unless they're on a whole different device, the ID is still good for that user. So you can kind of come back and go, hi, whatever you are, this is, I saw you before. You can kind of know that. But if they go to an Echo and they go to their phone, they'll get a new user ID in that case. There is also a workflow they recently launched where you can kick them into a workflow to have them sign up with your app, and then you can link accounts. It's still newish. Most apps don't use it, but the ones that are like built into like an Uber and that kind of stuff do, obviously, because you got to pay for it. But there is a workflow for that if you want to actually link it permanently with a user on your side.
Say I want to dictate a note to an app or something. Is there a time limit for how much audio it'll record?
I've never hit it. I don't know if there's a hard limit on how long it is. I know there are certainly note apps out there. There's an email app I've seen that you probably go pretty long. There is a timeout to waiting. It's a few seconds, I don't know, 10 or something like that seconds if you haven't said anything, and it'll send a request that you can then reprompt them if you want. But I don't think, there must be, but I've never hit it. They give you plenty of time to actually keep talking if you want to keep talking. No, not yet. That'd be cool, though. Am I good on time? Are we all done? Oh, got a few more minutes. Any other questions? There you go.
Does Alexa work only in English, or can it be configured to work in?
Yeah, so I can't remember the exact list of what it's been released of. I know it does a pretty good job. You've got to train it, but it does a pretty good job with accents. But it's still English accents, right? It's still, you have to have the accent. But I think they either have or they're shortly releasing it in other countries, but I don't know the list off the top of my head. But I know it does pretty well actually with accents. I know they have to, there's a way in the app to say trigger training. They have you read a few things back and forth, and like I said, it got my 3-year-old kid kind of accent. So that's a pretty rough one sometimes, and then they got that eventually. So, all right, thank you.